For my place-based lesson plan, I picked a Spring Valley Historic Site. Um, my rationale for kind of picking this place-based activity was because I went to teach in Junction City. I kind of reside there, and as I was driving in town in Junction City, I noticed that there was this large historic site, and I thought it would be a great activity for the students to kind of compare schools from uh, back then into now. So the historic site includes like I know one schoolhouse for sure, definitely, and then there's a barn where they used to keep like coal and stuff, and then I think maybe even horses. I've been like kind of researching it, so I figured it was also good for me to learn about, especially if I'm planning on teaching in Junction City, and have the students also be aware of that there is like a historical like site in Junction City within their own town and stuff. Um, so basically, like for the objectives, the standard I was gonna do with like change over time. I picked second grade because they're focusing on then and now, so I figured that that would be a good grade level to start with for comparing schoolhouses from then and from now. And so some of the like the objectives that I picked were like the students have to make two comparisons between schoolhouses and schools today, and then make two contrasts between schools from then and today. And then I also wanted the students to have the option of being creative, so I wanted them to be able to draw like one of these differences that they realized as they were going along. So, kind of a walk through my lesson. I wanted to make sure like the students understood what a schoolhouse was. So I found a book. It's called A One Room School by Bobby Coleman, and just to introduce students what a schoolhouse is and kind of be familiar what that term is, and maybe the book even explains some of those differences between schools now and then. Um, so like during this field trip, I really wanted the students to think of like what does a schoolhouse remind them of, like making those comparison and contrast, and even thinking about like technology, so like smart boards and iPads and like you know, I wanted the students to think about like could they do a school like that back then. So like how would they feel about it and stuff. I wanted to really understand what they were thinking. And then like for my assessments, I wanted the students to be able to write two comparisons and two contrasts. I originally was just gonna have them write it, but then I decided that using a Venn diagram might be a little bit more useful because they are second graders. So instead of having them write out all these sentences because they're still learning, I figure a Venn diagram would be more useful. And then I created on the worksheet a then and now slot so the students can actually draw their differences between schools back then and schools now. The significance of this place, I felt like it just really was something that the students could feel kind of like personal connection to. It wasn't something that like they had to go, you know, completely out of the city for, because the historic site is like it's usually about like 5 to 10 minutes away from most schools. So I think it's just really cool that the students can, you know, have that personal connection with the place because it's already where they're from. And then uh, since it's so close by, like their families can even take trips there if they would like to go again. Some of the skills that the students will be working on is uh, comparison and contrasting, of course, because they'll be using like the Venn diagrams and they'll be discussing that out loud. And then the students will also have the opportunity to like start building those connections between all these historical like artifacts that they will learn, because in the book it's gonna include like a lot of pictures because I wanted to make sure that before they went to the historical site, that they had some kind of idea what it is, so they can build those connections to have that prior knowledge. What I learned from creating this lesson was like in the classroom, usually you're thinking about like what kind of activities you're gonna do and how those activities are gonna align like with your objectives and your standards to basically create an assessment overall for the students. So I guess it was just more to think about, like also like like permission slips for one, and like this place-based activity I want, it's even though many teachers do it, is actually is kind of in an unsafe place to a point, because it's on like the corner of like a highway and a street and stuff. So there's a lot of like safety rules you got to go over, because you don't want anything to happen to the kids. So yeah, there's just a lot more I feel like you have to think about with field trips. But I mean, it's still good because it's more like the kids get to experience it. They get to be there themselves. They get to imagine what it would be like being in a schoolhouse. And yeah, I think that this was like a great trip, especially being so close by to the students. And this is a good way just to focus on comparison and contrasting without like just reading the book. We can actually experience it ourselves.